right up at the front of this thing. He's first of all a family man. He's an educator, a writer, and thinker about education and technology. He was born and grew up in the north of England and came to Canada in his teens. Taught 8 years at the Toronto District School Board before accepting a position at the American International School in Kuwait. He returned to Canada in 2001 and joined the Grand Erie District School Board, where he is currently the grade 5 teacher at Major Balaki School in Brantford, Ontario. Close enough. Mm-hmm. He writes about education and technology on his blog, and his thoughts on education have been published in the Toronto Star, the Globe and Mail, Hamilton Spectator, Brantford Expositor, and on the Canadian Educational Association website, and finally the National Education Policy Center website in the US. Now, the important thing is he's a classroom teacher. He's not somebody that's come down from some mountain somewhere. And he's going to share some of his thoughts on aspects of his work and with his kids.
Thank you very much, Don. Appreciate that. Screen okay for everyone? We're all good? Yeah? Do you need to turn it a little bit? No, it's fine. Hard. Okay. So if you would like any of the supporting information, any supporting materials, some of the background research or articles that this talk is based on, you can find them. This will be at the end of the presentation as well. If you need to catch it later, there's a short URL at the bottom. There's also a QR code. When my 16-year-old son saw me using a QR code, he said, "That's really cool, Dad. QR codes are retro. Nobody uses them anymore." I'm already retro with QR codes. So thank you very much for coming here. I appreciate you coming, and I appreciate your optimism. When we come to conferences like this, what we do is often we come here with full of hope, and I think that just the whole act of coming to a conference is a show that you believe that things will get better. And so I'm very conflicted when I come to give a talk like this, because I'm not really in the business of trying to foster your hope and make you feel better. And sometimes people leave presentations that I do feeling uncomfortable and unsettled, and so I apologize for that in advance. And thank you very much for being willing to take the chance of being open to listen to something that maybe isn't necessarily 100% positive. My favorite book when I was a kid was The Emperor's New Clothes. And what I really, really liked about it was this idea that one person can know the truth, even though it's not popular or supported by everyone else. And that one person can say it, even though not everyone can agree with it, and it still makes it right. And that one person can change how everyone sees everything, even though not everyone agrees with them. And so that's kind of some of the things that I try to do with my thinking, and some of the approaches I take to the things that I talk about and the things that I write about, is I try to say them the way I see them, even though not everyone agrees with me, and I'm fine with that. My hope is that I don't end up like this guy. That's my greatest fear, is that I just end up being some old guy yelling at things that don't matter. Okay? So I'm trying to get into that middle area where I'm being critical and thinking critically about the things that we do in school without becoming irrelevant or outdated. My whole objective here is to try and irritate you. But not irritate you in the sense of, oh, that guy's annoying and I don't want to talk to him again, but irritate you like a grain of sand irritates an oyster. And that you're going to take the things that we talk about and it's going to sit with you and unsettle you a little bit, and that you'll go off, and like an oyster does with a grain of sand, you're going to make a pearl out of it, and hopefully it'll do something and change things for you a little bit. That's my hope. I started off my teaching career, I was very lucky to be part of a group of student teachers where I got to sit in a classroom and work with a teacher for 4 months before I went to Teachers College. And that experience was really, really invaluable. I had a fantastic mentor teacher, and she did a lot of really creative interdisciplinary units, the kind of stuff that the ministry tells us we should be doing now, she was doing back then. And one of the first things we did is we did a project on Apache blanket patterns. And these are really, really interesting and cool. They're geometric patterns. They have spiritual meaning. It brought in a cultural aspect. There was a mathematical aspect and a visual arts aspect. Really nice interdisciplinary stuff. And one of the things that it stuck with me is that as part of the culture of the Apache blanket patterns, that each one must always have a fault in it. Each blanket must always have a fault because nothing can ever be perfect. There's always some glitch, there's always something, and nothing natural can ever be perfect. And I believe this to be a universal truth, that nothing is ever 100% perfect. I think we see that again in Islamic art, in that nothing in Islamic art is ever perfect. There's always a deliberate error because only God can make something perfect in Islamic art. And I think we see that again in Eastern philosophy, in that the yin and the yang, there's dots of each, the dark and the light, in each other. So each one, the dark contains the light and the light contains the dark. There's some of that within each one. Or if you want to put it differently, here's the good, here's the bad and the good and the bad. And only if you have all of it together do you have the complete perspective. The relevance of this, well, if we're really interested in embracing technology in our classroom, if that's what we really want to do, then we have to think critically about it. We have to look for what the bad is. We have to look for the things that are not working, the things that are imperfect. Take a look at them, find out what the consequences of them are, how they affect what we do, and start to address those things. Otherwise, we're not really taking advantage of the technology. We're not really transforming education. We're just reinforcing what we've always been doing. There's a long and very illustrious history of critical thinking in educational technology. Seymour Papert said, Seymour Papert said way back that combating technocentrism involves more than just thinking about technology. Okay? We have to think about its implications. We have to think about all the things that we do. And if you're not sure who Papert is, if a historian were to draw a line connecting Piaget's work on developmental psychology to today's trends in educational technology, the line would simply be Papert. He is the founder of a lot of the things that we do in technology in the classroom, and he believed we need to think about the implications of what we do with technology. When Steve Wozniak, one of the inventors of the Macintosh, is saying to us, computers in schools and kids don't come up thinking any better, then I think we have reason to pause. I think we have reason to stop and say, what are we doing? Is it working? And can we make it better? And if you really want somebody who's sort of like at the top of the pile when it comes to thinking critically about educational technology, you need to look no further than Audrey Waters, who if you're using social media, she's definitely worth following. Audrey says that without EdTech criticism, we'll still be stuck with a technocentrism that masks rather than uncovers, let alone challenges power. If we're interested in schools being places that change the world, and I think that's why most of us got into this, we're interested in schools being places that change the world, we have to think critically about technology. Otherwise, all technology will do is recreate the existing world. It'll recreate the same kind of power systems that we have in society generally. I am not a Luddite. I am not anti-technology. This is my first computer. Had a massive 32 kilobytes of RAM in it. My dad bought this from the factory in England when we went over there. A couple of things that I love about it. You'll notice that the programs were loaded on audio cassettes. And we would load the program, and if the volume wasn't too loud after 30 minutes, it would tell you volume too loud and you had to start again. And if you worked it perfectly, you got to play Flight Simulator. That was the extent of it. Very exciting stuff. And then I spent a lot of university hours in rooms that looked a lot like this, trying to make things work in Fortran. And so I was also the first person to buy one of these from the Master Bookstore, way back when. And so I feel like I've got a pretty long history with using technology. I got one of my first teaching jobs because I was the only person who put computers on their resume anyway. So I love technology and I love the way we use it. I'm not anti-technology, I just think we need to think critically about it. And I think that when the minister says that technology is the key to allowing our students to become innovators, entrepreneurs, and leaders of tomorrow, if we really believe that, and that seems to be our education policy, then we have to look at it from all aspects and work hard on it. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to try and skim what I think are the 5 critical things that we need to think about technology. Places where technology is not working. There's a lot more to all the things I'm going to talk about, and they all could probably have their own presentation. But we're going to skim over them and give you an idea of some of the things to watch for so you can be aware of them and start to think about them. We're going to turn over a few rocks, see what's underneath them, look at the bugs, and see what we can find. So the first thing I want to talk about is I want to talk about corporate influence in educational technology. I suspect that if we did a show of hands for people who use these products in the classroom, there wouldn't be anyone who didn't have their hand up. Is there anyone who doesn't have at least one of these products in the classroom anymore? You don't. How come?
I use Amazon.
Do you have them in your classroom though? Ah, so they're there, but you just choose not to use them. Got it. I wonder if your students know that these products are in the classroom. My kids certainly do. They know what's in the classroom and what's not. And when I think back to when I was in school, I had no idea who made the textbooks I was using. That's a huge shift in our classroom. Suddenly, there's a massive corporate influence, a massive corporate presence in our classrooms that children are aware of, very aware of. And what's interesting about this is that these are incredibly wealthy corporations. Wealthy corporations that are involved in what's going on in our classrooms. In fact, so wealthy that Apple is the #1 most profitable company in the world. Only ExxonMobil knocks Google and Microsoft. So the most profitable companies in the world are putting products into our students' classrooms. That's a huge thing that we need to think about and be aware of, and yet we don't. We don't think about it. Why? Why are they in our classrooms? I'm sorry, I feel like I'm blocking you. Okay, I feel we need to leave. Sorry. Why they're in our classrooms? Well, because EdTech is a huge business, estimated over $30 billion US in 2013, and of course, on its way up by about 13.9% a year. Predicted market of $60 billion by 2018. Massive amounts of money that corporations want. Canada, about 3 to 6 billion. Very large market. That's why the corporations are there, because they want the money from our schools. They're there to make money, and they're selling products to us. We now have a situation where people identify their boards by their corporate logo. You can ask people, are you a Google board? And people know. They know they're a Google board. I didn't sign up to be a Google board. I didn't sign up to work for Google or Microsoft or Apple. And in fact, the corporate influence on our classrooms has gone so far that we now have teachers who identify themselves by the corporate brand. Where teachers are very, very happy to announce to you which brands they work for, and who they're affiliated to. And we have to start asking ourselves, at what point do we need to step in and protect our students and be aware of this? And at what point does the professional judgment of people who identify themselves with certain corporate brands start to be affected by those corporate affiliations? Can we trust the input and the judgment of people who are clearly happy to associate themselves with corporate brands and not say, you know what, I'm really here as an independent person making critical judgments? I don't have answers for you, but I think we need to start asking these questions. Chomsky is quite clear that there is a corporate assault on public education. The corporations are coming to our schools and trying to take the money away from our public institutions. And we need to think about that. He says our kids are being prepared for passive obedience, not creative, independent lives. And are the goals of corporations, vast, profitable corporations, the same of what the goals should be of our schools for our students? Do corporate values align with the values of education? Are these really the kind of people we want to be getting in bed with? Question for you to ponder. What are some of the things that are affected by this corporate agenda? Professional autonomy and the ability to differentiate your learning. The decision for what learning materials are used in the classroom and how that's decided is somewhat obscure, but the last piece of information we have about it, I think this is 1990, the last time anything was written. This is from the Ontario Education Act, and it says that the principal, in consultation with the teachers, shall select from a list of textbooks. What I think that means is I think that means that learning materials should be selected by educators on site. I think that's what that means. I think if we substitute technology for textbooks, the idea is that the teachers and the principal get to figure out what's going on in the classrooms. I'm not sure that that's happening when it comes to technology. So I'd ask you to think about who chooses the digital instruction materials in your school. Do classroom teachers? Are they the ones who are saying, this is what I'd like to use in my classroom? Or is somebody in an IT office or in a board office making a decision that applies to all classrooms? And is that appropriate for all the students in the room? Because that's where the differentiation should be happening, in your room, not in the board office. Do educators even have input into the digital tools used? A lot of times it's board purchasing people making decisions without any educator input or even student input. So the people using digital tools are not making choices, and they don't have input into those choices at all. That needs to change. Is there a list of approved tools that educators select from based on student needs? If you have a student who needs a differentiated experience, do you have the ability to select from several tools that are appropriate and go, that's the one that works best for them? Or are you told, use this one, and it's good for everyone? Because that's not what's supposed to be happening. So think about that. Student data privacy. Second issue. I'd like you to consider a scenario, a little thought experiment for you. What if somebody came to you and made an offer that you couldn't refuse? They said, I want to come into your classroom, and I want to sit at the back, and I want to watch your students. I want to record everything they do in infinite detail. And maybe I'll even follow them home. And I'll record everything they do there too. And why do I want to do this? Well, I want to do this because I want to be better at selling them things. I want to be able to sell things to them very effectively, and so I need to know all that they're doing. If somebody came to you and made that offer to you, would you take that deal? Would you say, yeah, I'm okay with that? Or would you stop and ask questions and think about it? Because that's the kind of stuff we do every day with educational technology. Do we have any Prodigy users in the room?
My kids use it.
Your kids use it. There you go.
Because they were told by the school.
There we go. Prodigy is a very, very popular math game, sort of based on Pokemon, kind of. Sort of like Pokemon, where you got to catch her. But it develops math skills. And it's made by Smart Teacher Inc. in Burlington, Ontario. And it's been pushed very, very heavily through lots and lots of school boards. I've been told I have to use it as part of my math program. A lot of elementary teachers are. If you go to the Prodigy website, you will find the privacy policy. And every tool you use, every online tool has a privacy policy published. Privacy policy published here is typically hard to read. Okay? Not good. But if you find your way through it, here's what you'll find. It says that Smart Teacher may share aggregated anonymous data such as overall performance improvements through the use of products and services with third parties such as marketing agencies, advertisers, or potential investors. So that's the first thing. They're taking student data that's generated by your students, and they're saying, we are going to reserve the right to sell that stuff to advertisers and marketers. And then it also says, if they sell some or part of their assets, customer information will be included in the sale. So they can actually sell that data to anyone they want. That's part of the privacy policy of Prodigy that's being used in Ontario schools, and it's just one of many examples. Just last week, in fact, I heard of an Ontario board that's using Prodigy that simply gave Prodigy all their student information to make registration more simplified, so students didn't have to put in their own data. This is the kind of control and information we're passing over to educational technology sites and corporations all the time. Sarah Grimes at the University of Toronto makes this point in her piece. If a marketer knocked on your door, asked to spend several hours secretly observing your child, you'd probably tell them to take a hike. But that's happening every day with very little resistance. And we do that as teachers all the time. And it's hard to figure out why. It's hard to figure out why we don't ask more questions, we don't think about it, or even say, where's this going, what are we doing?
But do you know, like, is Google Classroom? Does that put us? I'd never even thought about this, so you've got me.
Good, I'm glad.
Yeah.
What do you want to know about Google Classroom?
Is that information collected and collated and used for
Here's what I can tell
passed
you.
on?
So in one of the links in the thing, there's an article I wrote for the Star about data privacy. Okay? About a year ago, Google maintained that they were not scanning student accounts. They were not collecting data from students. Okay? They were sued in California for collecting student data. And in private filings for the court case, they admitted that they were, in fact, using student data, collecting it, and using it to advertise to students. People in Ontario will tell you that Ontario boards have a special deal with Google, Google Apps for Education, signed off, that Google says they will not collect student data. Okay? Through the article, I had the ability to interview a spokesperson for Google, and I said, so Ontario boards say you're not collecting data, are you? And she said, oh yeah, we are. We can't turn it off. It's built into the algorithm. We can't stop collecting data. That's kind of what Google is. Google is a large corporation that collects information and then uses that information in marketing. That's what it is. Business. If you have a large EdTech corporation, there's only one way to make money, and that's to sell data. There's nothing else you have that's valuable, right? Same with Facebook, same with Twitter. That's the only viable model that they have. So Google is collecting data on Ontario students, no question about that. And the only question is, what are they doing with it? How are they using it?
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
What about the tools such as the Khan Academy, which also provides a lot of lesson plans, teachable things which are really...
Khan Academy just as guilty. Khan Academy was using student data to market to students who registered for lessons on there. They stopped doing it about a year ago when it came out publicly that they were doing it. They built profiles of students. When a student logs in, they note the location that the student is coming from. The privacy policy of Khan Academy reserves the right to find information about other students, from other sites. So they go on the web, and when you go on to Khan Academy, they put a cookie on that student's computer to monitor their browsing history. They collect a lot of information because Khan Academy has no other way to make money. They have no way to make, what do they do that you can pay for? They don't charge you anything. The only thing they can do is collect information about users and sell it.
But that may be the fundamental problem with this big data.
Yes.
Right. So it is not probably only isolated to EdTech and the tools coming to it, but also for every big data.
I'm not suggesting that this is an EdTech problem.
Right.
It's a technology problem.
Right.
Just in the same way that when I use Twitter, I am paying for that service with my data. But there's a huge difference between me doing that freely of my own choice when I know what I'm doing than me saying to a student, you have to use this as part of your school. That's fundamentally different, right? Yeah?
And instead of database tell us which other website you're using, which other one that will not collect data?
Well, okay, first of all, I don't believe there are any that don't collect student data. I haven't seen any. If you go on and look at privacy policies, they all collect student data. And there are some legitimate reasons to collect student data, right? In some cases, they're collecting student data so that they can show student progress. You know, student was here, they answered this many math questions, now they've improved. That's student data, right? They also collect, and that's legitimate, right? They also collect student data to improve the product. This is working well, nobody's going here, let's phase that out, right? I think what we're interested in is we're interested in people collecting student data to sell it, right? Or to target advertising at students. That's what we're worried about the most. And of course, companies are not interested in you knowing that information. Really, the only way is to look at the privacy policies, to go in and look and see what it says. I wish it were easier. I think where I'm at with privacy right now is understanding that there are no free rides, right? If somebody says that you're getting something for free, you're not. Trying to say to yourself, okay, I need to do a risk analysis on this. What am I getting? Is it worth the risk? Just try to go in with your eyes open and go, you know what? If I want to have this product, then I need to do this. Is it worth that risk? There's a hand over here. No? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I was just thinking because, much like you were saying, in certain elementary boards as well as in the intermediate, there's a lot of math competitions online with games involved, net math and Khan Academy and other things like that. And I don't feel like I have the option as a teacher who's new to the school, and there's other math teachers who are saying they're doing this, and they do it every year, and we've won several years, and I don't have the right to object to it. I can tell my kids not to use it as homework, because they're doing that every day. However, when it comes to entering contests, I don't have the right to be like a data collection conscientious objector at my school building. And I was wondering what you do about that. Like if we're being careful about it, we're thinking about it, but in the end, I do go rogue fairly often in education, but I don't know what to do about that.
If it were me, I'd start asking questions.
Like why do you?
I wouldn't say, we can't do this. What I'd say is, like, what happens to this data? Where does it go? What do we use it for? And when they don't know, because they won't know, you say, well, I'm going to look into that. Is that okay? You know, like take that approach. Another important thing in this is there is a general accepted practice for children's data that there must be informed consent by parents. Okay? And informed consent is a really important thing, because informed consent doesn't mean that they signed a piece of paper. That's not what that means. It means that they signed a piece of paper knowing what it was they were signing and the implications of it, right? So if you're going to give informed consent for somebody to enter a math contest, then you should know what data is being collected and where it's going and what it's doing.
Doesn't want to trust on this, and they assume that we know.
It's almost as if we would sign up for online services without even knowing the privacy policy.
But don't you think we've sort of
Yeah, we all do it, right? Well, you don't. You don't. You're better than me, but yeah. Yeah.
But don't you think we've gotten to a point where, like my second reaction is, but does it matter? Does it matter if they're collecting that information?
So your question is, does it matter? Because what are the implications of it?
Because sure, they'll use it for targeting advertising or marketing. But that's the reality almost of the world we live in at this point, and I feel like we might be better off making sure our kids are well educated in how to deal with that targeted advertising situation.
I think there's two responses to that. First response is that when I go to show a movie in my grade 5 class, I can never show a movie that they like, because what I can show in my classroom is miles away from what they can see at home, right? We have different standards in schools, right? As schools, we have a responsibility to make sure we're being that we have the highest standard of care. And so just because somebody is able to use Facebook or Twitter or something like that in the public doesn't mean it's okay for us in school. I'm not saying it's not okay. I'm saying that we have a higher standard to hold ourselves to, right? There may be one child in your class whose parents don't want that going on, but that child may not feel supported in their right to say, I don't want to do this, because it's part of the program. That's the first thing. The bigger danger with data collection is what happens when data sets get merged. Okay? Because what's happening is that data profiles are being built all the time. Politico did a report 2014 called The Business of Spying on Little Kids. And they reported that some EdTech apps are collecting over 10 million pieces of data a day about students. More than Netflix, more than Facebook, more than Google. They're collecting that much data. And the fear is that that data, combined with other data, will end up being a data profile that will then affect people's lives in the future. I was reading an article yesterday about predictive policing, where police go in and arrest people because the data they've selected suggests that they're going to commit a crime. Somebody goes to apply for a loan, and the interest rate is higher because their data profile says they're a greater risk. Already, we have situations where if I go to a website and I'm from a higher income area, the prices quoted on those websites are different than if I'm from a low income area. These are the implications of data being collected and how it's being used. And that's why we need to be aware of it and concerned. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I agree whatever you said on the data collection, all this stuff. But I think I have not heard from you how that fits into the learning context. What actually the information of the students are gathered, and how it is used for marketing. I mean, they may use the data to market their product, but how does it affect the child as the student?
Well, I think that's what I was just talking there, is that, so what happens is somebody collects the data and then they sell it. They sell it to other people. And there are companies, and their only job is to aggregate data. So they will take data from here, data from here, data from here, and they'll link it up so there's a large pile of data that gives a profile to someone. And I think the thought is that at some point, Johnny is going to apply to university, and somebody's going to go to a predictive website, and it's going to say Johnny's a B+ risk to finish graduation, and it's all based on that aggregated data. That's the implication. Okay? Good question. Roy?
I feel too that with the way things are going with privacy and big data, a lot of I feel like there's a kind of analogy we can draw to something like climate change, where as a general public we kind of feel like, oh, we understand some of the dilemmas here, and we have no idea how any of us as individuals or even as an organization do anything about it. Have we gone past the point of no return? All that kind of stuff. That's why it reminds me a little bit of climate change. But the thing that I think we forget when we ask kind of questions like, so what can we do? Is we actually do have a lot of leverage in this situation, much more than something perhaps like climate change, because we are the people who make this, we're giving the data. So if organizations, like in Europe, for instance, because the population there has a much, I guess, stronger awareness of the issues, and demands companies and organizations and corporations to attend to them, those people are doing things such as moving their data into their borders, for instance. So for instance, a big issue we have right now with something like Google Apps for Education, which I'm a big user of, by the way, and I've used it with students many times, is that the data is going either to the States or overseas, to unknown locations actually. So as long as it's not in Canada, it means that we don't have any rights over our own data. We lose our constitutional rights that we otherwise would have if the data was inside a box inside Canada. So that's an example of something where if Canadians said, no, yes, we want to use Google Apps for Education, we would like the data to be stored in our borders, then Google, trust me, would do it. It's because we are saying, oh, whatever you want. Google wants our business.
And I think the ultimate point of this is that we need better privacy laws. But before we can even get to the idea of privacy laws, we need better awareness. Because we need people to be aware of it and to sort of start to be able to say, this isn't okay. Right? Part of the reason why Europe has better privacy laws is because there's greater awareness there. And we're not even having these conversations yet in Ontario classrooms. Right? Heidi?
Two things in this conversation. Ontario, our privacy commissioner has created a gold standard for privacy policy, which is called privacy by design. That when these kinds of tools are being designed, privacy or privacy standards is built into the design. That has been recognized internationally the way it's laid out as what should be the gold standard for education. The other thing is, in the United States, a number of states have begun passing laws related to teacher collection of data. So last year, California has passed the toughest law about student information and collection of information on minors. They passed laws around preventing third parties from accessing that data and using that data to market. So there's some places in the States that are much farther ahead of us here in Canada around protecting children's information when it comes to
British Columbia is years ahead of us in terms of their privacy laws and their approach to student data. I know somebody out in British Columbia, and it's her job to go into schools and talk to schools about what do we do to protect student data, what can you put online, what do you do if there's a student data breach, all that kind of stuff. That's somebody's job, and yet we're not even at that point yet.
And yet you see this kind of huge.
They did, yeah. 3.4 million student records lost. Yeah. And that's part of the danger of student data privacy as well. You know, it's now out in the wind. Kids, counseling records, history of abuse, all that kind of stuff. It's lost. They don't know where it is.
Yeah, such presentations are usually done even for the university.
Yes.
I think probably universities are more informed and have probably a better dialogue on these privacy policy issues than the schools. You know.
I have another presentation that I do just about data, and in there I have a slide that talks about the fact that student data is very highly valued on the black market. Part of the reason why is because it's very easy to get. We have very, very low standards when it comes to protecting student data. I'm going to keep going. So if you have little kids, you know what Webkins. Webkins is it's the 15th largest children's website in the world. It also happens to be run by GANS, which is in Woodbridge, Ontario. And in 2012, the Office of the Privacy Commissioner of Canada initiated a privacy complaint against GANS. And in 2014, the report came out in the GANS, and there were a bunch of recommendations for sites targeted at children and students. And so this is what you should be seeing in terms of protecting student data. These are the recommendations. First of all, that these sites must minimize the collection of personal data. Okay? There's no reason when a student is logging into a website or using an app that they use their real name. There's no reason for that at all. It should be anonymous information as much as possible. These websites should prevent the inadvertent collection of personal information. What they found is that if they just left it up to kids, kids would just put in their real names. And nobody was checking on that. Websites can easily stop that from happening, and that needs to happen. What happens to the accounts of things that you use when your kids have left? What happens to those accounts that were there last year? Where has the data gone? That information should be deleted, okay? And a lot of times it's not. The privacy practices must be understandable. If you can create a site that explains a complicated and complex multi-level role-playing game to help kids learn how to spell, you can design a privacy policy that a kid can read and understand and know what it's about. The privacy policy should be easy to understand by the users. And the default settings should be private. A lot of times when you use sites, they are not. A lot of times you have to go in and change the settings to make things private. For kids, they shouldn't be. It should be automatically private. And then you have to change it to make it more open. Okay? So those are some things to watch for in terms of practices for good sites. Another good person to follow on this is Jesse Irwin at Jesse Source Rex. One thing is clear: those who have the power to protect student privacy will not do so as long as they can continue to subsidize the cost of public education with student data. Let's be clear: we're paying for services with student data. That's what we're doing. Okay? That's why we think it's free. I don't have a lot of resources, but this is an excellent one if you want to get into this with your students. This is a project from a few people, including the National Film Board. It's a series of 8 6 independent units that show kids how they're being tracked. This is just a trailer for it. Just a trailer.
Have you noticed the internet getting creepier? It used to feel like a fun, magical place, but these days, something feels off. It seems like a few companies are getting rich, and the rest of us get tracked. And the more things are targeted to us, the less equal we become. So a group of makers and public media folks got together to explore what is happening. From our mobile phones to social networks, from personalized advertising to big data. Every 2 weeks, we'll release a new personalized documentary with a different perspective. We want you to understand the value of your privacy, so we're going to ask you to let us track you. During each episode of Do Not Track, you'll be able to use your own data to understand how information about you is used by others. We'll give you more knowledge, so you'll have more power. Let's track the trackers together.
So, 7 episodes. They're all up now. They're all on the website. National Film Board, so it's Canadian appropriate. It's a really great way for students to learn about what's happening to their data and where it's going. Digital divide. William Gibson, the author of Cyberpunk, said, the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. And never has this been truer than when it comes to technology in the classroom. In 2014, CIRA, the people who run the internet in Canada, produced a report. One of their findings was that a great digital divide persists where lower income households remain without internet. About how many? About 40% of Canadians in the lowest income quartile don't have internet access. So lots of students in there don't have internet at home. Yes, ma'am?
I'd like to just tweak that to also say rural households.
It's definitely
It's not just lower income, but it's also rural.
That's definitely a factor too. Yeah, we were talking about that earlier. Compare that with 5% of Canadians in the highest income quartile. So clearly, if you have money, you have access. If you don't have money, it's much less likely that you do. This has been a historical problem. Even back in '86, Arthur, Mark Brown, look at this. They're studying a book. She's got a book. I don't know what he's doing. Here's Muffy, the rich kid. She's on it. The digital divide was used the first time by Bill Clinton in his State of the Union address in 2000, where he said, every child deserves the right to chance to participate in the information revolution. 15 years we've been aware of this. Even in Canada, StatsCan did a study on the digital divide in 2003 and said from those from low social economic status are less likely to have a computer in their home. You'd think we would have made some progress. In fact, in 2013, it's getting bigger. So we're not making progress. In fact, we're going back on this issue. What are some of the consequences of this? First of all, students from low-income families aren't exposed to technology. I teach in a low socioeconomic status school with lots of kids who struggle with that. I usually have about 40% of my kids that tell me to have internet access at home. Most of them don't. When we try to do BYOD, nobody has anything to bring. Okay? There's a second level digital divide, which means that kids don't see adults using technology to solve problems or be creative. Some of my kids have technology at home, but it's not netbooks, it's not laptops, it's not tablets, it's Xboxes. I see them as consumption devices. This is the second level digital divide. Kids don't see technology as a way to solve problems, they see it as a way to consume information, and that's all. Low-income students can't access the same resources outside of school time. Some kids I can't send homework home with them because they can't do it. We had to abandon Edmodo. We can't use it. Not enough kids online. Kids who only access the internet at school get a limited view of what the internet is because internet at school is always filtered. Okay? Think about what that does to how you see the way that the internet is used. And then finally, there are lots of innovative practices like bring your own device or flip class that you just can't use with those kids because they don't have access to technology. Technology is changing our teaching profession. It's changing the way we see how we teach. What do these jobs have in common? Anyone? We got it yet?
They don't exist.
These are all jobs that have been eliminated by technology. And we have to ask ourselves the question, is the same thing happening to teaching? Is teaching going to be eliminated by technology in some way? This is a very old idea. Back in the 1960s, Dr. Donald Bitzer at the University of Illinois invented the Plato, program logic for automated teaching operations. It's a teaching machine. His idea was, we'll just put these in classrooms, we won't need teachers anymore. And we're still debating it. From the New York Times last year, will computers ever replace teachers? Most people agree that we won't, okay? That teachers aren't going anywhere, okay? However, it seems quite clear that it is changing the way we teach and how we teach. Teachers are not and cannot be automatons handing out information to students. They are leaders, guides, facilitators, and mentors. So technology is changing the way our profession works. Yes, sir.
We're finding out a lot in a small school that I'm in. The course isn't available, they go online and do the course.
Yeah.
You could have 40, 45 people in that course, one teacher with one person in contact.
Yeah.
So in a sense, we are getting teachers if we're moving that way.
There are certainly people who believe that part of the push for educational technology is to reduce the number of teachers needed. That thought is out there. Yeah. If you don't know Sugar Mitra, he's a great guy to follow. His Hole in the Wall project is groundbreaking in terms of what he did in India. Teachers often ask me, am I going to lose my job? I say, no, your job will get harder. It will become a different job. It will go from being a master standing at the front of the class to a helpful friend at the back. And so this was a Canadian study from 2013 that found that older, more experienced teachers were more likely to use technology in the classroom than younger teachers. Kind of counterintuitive. The explanation was that you need different kind of classroom management skills to teach effectively with technology. And younger teachers just don't have those skills. So again, changes in how we teach and what we teach. So some questions that this all brings up for us. What about teachers who are not suited to using technology? Technology is not for everyone. We know from differentiation that nothing is for everyone. What about those teachers who are not suited to using technology? What happens to them? Are they still a valuable part of our schools? What about students or subjects that don't want or suit technology? We seem to be in the business right now of trying to shoehorn technology into everything. Do we need to use technology in visual arts? What about in music? What about the phys ed? Or are there certain places where we don't need to use it? Are we even having those conversations with other educators? And here's the last one, infrastructure. If you've been around technology any time, this will give you a sort of a shudder down the back. This is the blue screen of death. And this is what you would see when your Windows computer crashed, as it seems to do every day. If you saw this, you're probably an innovator or an early adopter. One of those people who would stand in line to get the very first edition of a device. And those people are in teaching just like they are anywhere else. These guys invented or created this technology adoption life cycle, which divides people into 5 different groups. And over here are the innovators, and over here are the early adopters. Want to look at it a different way? The innovators are here. They're the ones who make the mistakes and make the new stuff happen. The early adopters are the people who've got to be first in line, and they get it to work. And there's probably some early adopters in here. In order to make the jump in educational technology, we have to move past the early adopters and get to this early majority, right here. But the needs of those people are different. These people right here, people like me, are more than happy to have things crash and fix. We're okay with it. We're dedicated and we'll make it work. These people right here will not. If the projector doesn't work, they turn it off and they put it in the closet and they say, that's it, I'm done. Doesn't work. Early adopters are eager to explore new options, they're willing to take risks, and they like to spread new ideas. The early majority, they're socially aware. They don't want to risk rejection by standing out from the crowd. They're approaching new ideas with caution, and when others adopt, they dive in for fear of being left behind. So if we're going to engage that early majority, that 34% who we need to start getting more people using technology in the classroom, what are their needs? Well, the first thing they need is they need to be exposed to embedded early adopters. The top-down PD model doesn't work well. They need to see teachers using technology in the classroom down the hall, see that it works, and then they believe. Just because an expert tells them, that's not very effective for these people. Secondly, they need support in learning how to use them and encouraging them to take risks. But most importantly, they need a reliable infrastructure. They need machines and infrastructure that work 99% of the time. Educational technology should be as reliable as your TV. You push it and it works almost every time. And we're not quite there yet. The 2013 International Computer and Information Literacy Study said Ontario is doing very well on the use of technology. It said the vast majority of Ontario teachers reported that they have solid experience using technology for teaching. It said that they had high levels of confidence, and it said that they had highly positive attitudes. But two biggest barriers, one of them was not enough computers. And I bet a lot of people in here feel like they don't have enough access to computers to run this successfully. Orion is providing a reliable educational network in Ontario for universities, and this is the possibility of some of the things you can do if you've got a robust infrastructure.
Right now, Ontario is at a turning point as we engage in a new knowledge economy. Ontario competes on the world stage. Innovation is fundamental for future growth. We need some really bright people with some creative ideas to help work through this challenge.
Today, an enormous amount of learning that occurs with students is in a hybrid context. It applies technology to the learning that would typically take place in a classroom, but it also requires a virtual classroom. That virtual classroom is provided through the innovation that's allowable when you have a high-speed network like Orion, facilitating those educational experiences for students. Orion allows our institutions, whether it's our researchers or faculty who are working in the classroom, to do pretty exciting things in ways that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do.
So on one side, Orion is one of the fastest research and education networks in the world. On the other side is that we support 2 million people that use our network every day, and we're just using technology to enable them to do the things they need to do on a day-to-day basis, whether that's searching on the internet or doing world-class cancer research.
Cancer research is looking at genomics, and in particular, you can now take the genome of a particular individual and you can screen that genome for susceptibility to cancer. And this can take hundreds of hours on hundreds of processors, and that's just for a single individual. And without Orion, we would be useless. We wouldn't connect the researchers with the resources. We couldn't get the data in, we couldn't get the results out. It's a critical part of the whole package of an innovation, modern knowledge economy.
So the connectivity that Orion provides to all of our researchers and students just exists. They don't have to worry about the technology. We're just there to support them. Our goal is to bring all of these people together so that enable them to be the best they can be in developing research, education, and innovation for Ontario.
I love the part of that where he says the technology and the infrastructure just exists. They don't have to worry about it. The technology should be invisible. It should almost be like we don't even know it's there because we're so focused on the task. We're not there yet. Orion holds a conference, and this spring's conference, it was agreed at that conference that we need to get Ontario government to invest in connectivity, and 40% of our schools don't have connections. Okay? If we're really interested in educational technology and making the jump, we have to have a better infrastructure. Hopefully, some of that stuff has unsettled you a little bit and given you pause to think, and you'll go away and start to ask questions and start conversations of your own, because we need to start addressing these kind of things. But only by asking those questions and considering these hard issues can we really start to think about moving forward with technology beyond where we are. That's the URL and the QR code if you want it. 236. I'll put that back on. Does anybody have any last comments, questions, anything you'd like to say? It's okay, you can say.
I think I had something. It was
Uh-oh.
I I like to think that if the power, like, and I know we send kids out if the power goes out, but I would like to think that if I went off grid or if technology crashed or if it was a zombie apocalypse, that I would still be able to teach in the future. And that's something I'd like to maintain. I don't want to get to a place, well, I know I'm going to have to, but when you get to a place where technology is imperceptible and we can concentrate on the task and it becomes ubiquitous, I don't know how we're going to be able to talk about privacy and other things like that once it, for our students and for our kids, how it's going to be for them, because they might not even notice that it's even a thing, unless we educate them that, yeah, there are privacy settings and the default is public and we're trying to fix that, but I mean, you have to know.
And I'm not going to suggest to you that I have answers to any of these things. I think the thing that concerns me the most is that we're not even having these discussions yet.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not talking about any of these issues. We're simply marching forward, opening up our iPads or opening up our Chromebooks and getting our kids online. And I would like us to stop and think, and maybe ask some questions and say, what about this or what about that?
I saw a classroom with no computers recently. It was really cool. The Al over with Ottawa, he does whiteboarding around the surface of his room, and the kids just have big papers and whiteboards, and then he just talks to them, and they do stuff. It's weird. It's like so, and I mean, they're standing up, so it's not like when I was a kid, but they're actually not plugged into anything. They're plugged into each other. They're talking to each other.
And then you have the opposite end of the spectrum. I was talking to a supply teacher who went into a class in our board, and it's a paperless class.
Yeah.
And she said she felt like she was stealing because nobody talked to her. The kids came in, they picked up their machines, they started learning, they worked on their stuff, they put their machines away, they went out for recess. She would walk around and say, do you need any help? And they'd be like, no. Yeah, they were self-directed learners using technology. Yes, sir.
My background is engineering, so technology. I've been involved for 10 years in the industry. Now I'm teaching, and obviously I'm using a lot of technology in my class. I'm a science teacher. I'm using computer, iPad to do lab, to do measurement, to do calculation. My kids use a lot of different apps. But I never use technology to communicate with them. Communicate in class. And it is a big frustration of me when I open my iPad, I read every morning the paper, and I go in La Presse or in Globe and Mail in the section technology, and I see that technology just became Twitter, Google, and it's just communication.
Well, communication has been revolutionized by technology.
So, but people think technology now, it really relates to that. For me, technology is much more than that.
I agree.
And so when the board come to our school and try to convince the teacher to get the technology into the class, they're not talking about technology. They're talking about communication with the technology. I don't have any time to spend to I'm using technology for other things. So I just wanted to say that.
It's a good point. Okay, thank you. Anyone else? 2:30. Thank you very much, everybody.
Can you go back on screen? Sorry.
Oh, yes, sir.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's where you want? Yeah?
Yeah.
Very thought-provoking talk from Campbell. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Continue to tune in to the Science Teachers Association of Ontario live talks on Google Hangouts. If you missed it, you can always watch from the start on our YouTube channel or on our Google Plus page. Thanks.
Bye.